Water comes in and water goes out. Transepidural water loss. Yes, it's a mouthful. It's such a mouthful that people often refer to it as TEWL. Simply put, it just means that water vapors are leaving your skin from the inside of your body. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, is that sweating? Well, no, it's not. Water leaves the body in several ways. One would be sweating, which is classified as something called active transport, meaning your body has to exert energy to make it happen. Transepidural water loss is something called passive diffusion, meaning that your body is making little to no effort to make it happen, and we have very little control over it. With sweating, you can lose around 2 to 4 liters of water. With transepidural water loss, we're talking somewhere around 300 to 400 milliliters. Not the same amount. What are the factors that increase transepidural water loss? The strength of the skin barrier, the humidity of the environment that you live in. So the more humid climate that you live in, the less water that you lose through transepidural water loss. The drier the environment, the more water that you're going to lose. And that goes back to the idea of passive diffusion, is the body is always working to keep itself in balance. So that's why in the wintertime, your skin is going to feel drier than it does in the summertime when it's very humid. Why I still have dry skin when I live in about 85% humidity, I don't know. I've got to stop drinking so much coffee. The nuts and bolts of how passive diffusion happens in our skin goes back to the horny layer.
Who you calling horny again?
That's the stratum corneum. You guys know this. It is the very top layer of the skin. That is where the diffusion is occurring. So as I was reading about transepidural water loss, there's not a whole lot of talk about the actual chemical or biological process of it occurring. It does go back to Fick's law. If you're interested, you can look that up. I did have to go back to books, and it was interesting. I found a book that in the 50s, they were talking about the guys who originally came up with the observation that moisture or water was leaving the skin aside from sweating. It was a journal article from the late 50s, and they were referencing the early 50s saying, hey, I think those guys were right. Why do you hear people talk about transepidural water loss in skincare? Here are 2 of the reasons that I believe it's mentioned so much in blog posts, skincare, Instagram, and that is because transepidural water loss is an indicator of the health of the skin barrier. Essentially, if your stratum corneum is healthy and doing its job, then your transepidural water loss is not going to be significant. However, if you have cracked skin, if you have a skin condition, then your transepidural water loss is going to be greater. And the more moisture that you're losing from the lower levels of skin, the more compromised or prone to injury that your skin is going to be. The other reason it's mentioned a lot is because people are trying to sell products to prevent it. Now, I've been doing a lot of reading about occlusives, and so I'm going to just drop that my next 3 videos for Fridays are going to be humectants, emollients, and occlusives. Because one of the things about occlusives is they are trying to prevent transepidural water loss, and in doing so, maintain hydration in the skin. I've read some pretty interesting things about it, so I'm excited to share that with you guys in the coming weeks. That's it for this video, guys. I know it was definitely on the fast side. I have had a crazy week in which I had to use my mind a lot. So when I was contemplating and editing down what I was going to do tonight, I decided to just keep it simple, stupid. And when I say stupid, I'm referring to myself. And yeah, so I will see you guys next week.